And so what we like to do as a panel is to talk one about the current state of play. And George Doherty's book is just a masterful explanation of sort of where we sit technologically, and then understand what that means for us both operationally, strategically, and what it means for our responsibility in employing these kinds of tools in modern warfare.
Hi, I'm Jay Maselli, co-founder and CEO of RTX, and it's a privilege for me to welcome Colonel Retired Bob Underwood, also Dr. Bob Underwood, to tonight's episode of RTX The Future, where we're going to focus on a really intriguing panel that he has put together for the RTX House at AUSA. I know Bob very well, but I want to give him a few moments to introduce himself. So Bob, over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jay. I'm excited to be here, and I'm glad to be part of the Red Thread X team, bringing the Red Thread House at AUSA.
Right.
As Jay said, I'm a retired U.S. Army colonel, mostly in cavalry formations. I'm also a philosopher with expertise in the ethics of killing, the moral and cognitive aspects of warfighting. So I have a binding passion, a guiding passion for the fight of combined arms maneuver and the operational art and how that connects with the just war. And that really is what we were trying to do when we brought this panel together on agentic warfare. Because if you know anything about combat in the 21st century, you know that very soon and already in many places that involves fighting with artificially intelligent systems and robots on the ground and in the air, and as part of the kill chains that participate in our targeting cycles that are compromise comprise most of combined arms maneuver in the 21st century. So our panel three, is titled "The Things That Fight: The Beasts, the Bots, and the Promethean Ghosts in Conflict in the 21st Century." It's going to be moderated by Joe Byerly. Joe Byerly is the founder of From the Green Notebook and the host of the From the Green Notebook podcast. It's an excellent podcast. Really excited to have Joe running us through this conversation. He's already done a podcast episode on George Doherty's book, which is the centerpiece of our panel. The book is The Beast in the Machine. Still number one on Amazon in defense tech. And then joining myself is another philosopher, Dr. Todd Hughes, who is the Chief Innovation Officer and VP for Scientific Systems, which is an autonomous systems company based out of DC. He's a philosopher that specializes in cognitive science and the philosophy of mind, but he's also spent about 20 years in industry, bouncing between companies and DARPA.
Thanks for that introduction, Bob. And really quickly, just for the audience, the RTX House at AUSA is something that we are taking from a model we applied in Austin in March of 2025. We are seeking to bring together critical dialogue about the tough problems that the Army faces in anticipation of a future fight. We want to have innovators with creative solutions in the room to those tough problems. And we want to make sure the resources to help accelerate the delivery of those innovative solutions are in the room as well. So the way I think about it is ideas, innovation, and investors together in one place where we can have tough dialogue about those problems that must be solved so that we can deter, and if that fails, win the next fight. So Bob, as we were putting together the series of panels for the RTX House at AUSA, you stepped up and said, I will be the lead for panel 3. This panel that's going to be exceptional with you, Joe, George, and Todd. What was your motivation in putting this panel together?
Thanks, Jay. It's a great question. I have been, from the time I started my PhD studies at Oxford in 2016, that was about the time I'm sure most people in the audience remember the YouTube video called Slaughterbots, right? This was a very evocative video of weaponized drones flying around with facial recognition and killing a bunch of innocent people. Of course, a horrific uh, imagined scenario. What's been frustrating to me and a lot of other philosophers is that uh, that frame essentially captured an important conversation in an absolutely fictional space. So as a philosopher, as a moral philosopher specifically, I'm looking to bring the conversation around the morality and ethics of killing in war back down to a little bit closer to reality, and talk about these agentic systems and robotics, trying to fit them into where they actually sit in the space, both theoretically and morally, in terms of how they fit into our own actions, but then also how they fit into operationalization of strategy and working and fighting together with human beings. And so, what I think we're going to have is, we've talked about this once as panel members. The theme is something along the lines of, there's no such thing as killer robots. And of course, we love this theme because it's obvious that there are things called that are killer robots. But the point is to make the point that whatever your fears are of robotics and artificial intelligence, the current state of the technology is just really not there, right? We are not looking at Terminators walking across the battlefield and killing bunches of people. And but the other side of this is also true. Whatever your hopes, whatever you think, whatever magical thinking is powered by, just rub some AI on it, right? The way we tend to think that artificial intelligence and robotics will solve all our problems. That's also just not the case, right? The technology is not there. And so what we like to do as a panel that is to talk, one, about the current state of play. And George Doherty's book is just a masterful explanation of sort of where we sit technologically, and then understand what that means for us both operationally, strategically, and what it means for our responsibility in employing these kinds of tools in modern warfare.
This is going to be really fascinating discussion, Bob. And I like the fact that you anchored on 2016 for your personal cognitive arc, because I think that means we're going to be able to look at the convergence of two parallel paths to what the current and future operating environment will look like. And I think those two parallel paths are the devastation of the Nagorno-Karabakh war and the 7 seconds to die mentality that the Armenians and Azerbaijanis demonstrated through that particular conflict, coupled with the emergence of irregular non-state actors using UAS and other systems to start deploying ordnance, and then how those two ideas converge in 2022 with the quick evolution of combat and the stasis that's emerged, the general stasis that's emerged in Ukraine following the Russian invasion. What are your thoughts about how those ideas all converge to where we are and where we're going?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you bring up. It calls to mind. I actually had the experience of listening to an Azeri and an Armenian debate the NK War on the back porch of one of my best friends' house. We were stationed at NATO together, and both Azerbaijan and Armenia have people obviously in Brussels, and my friend was a foreign area is a foreign area officer, and so we were at this gathering, and this conversation broke out. Right? What do these technologies mean? And of course, for them, it was a very passionate, very intense conversation. The Caucasus hold no second places when it comes to people passionate about fighting for their country. Um, but what George talks about in his book is essentially, as far as the technical or operational side of this problem, what he calls is a crisis of maneuver. And it really is the case that these robotic systems and artificial intelligence fueling our targeting cycles has brought about the case that there's a real crisis of maneuver. If you are seen anywhere on the modern battlefield, you are likely going to receive very precise. In fact, George introduces in his book a distinction between precision fire and surgical fire, right? So autonomous weapons that can go from selecting, I'm going to hit the tank and not the Jeep, to I'm going to hit the tank under the turret basket, or I'm going to hit the tank between the third and fourth road wheel because I know that's where my munition will cause the most damage. And so it's inside this crisis of maneuver that George lays out in his book, The Beast and the Machine, that we start to talk about what both the what the technological solutions might be to the crisis of maneuver and what that means for our responsibility in terms of employing these machines inside our kill chains.
And so, to that point, Bob, I think what we're seeing is a democratization of the capabilities, meaning non-state actors, small state actors, and then just looking at what Ukraine's done in terms of effectively developing and deploying robotic systems and increasing autonomy of those. In your professional assessment, where will the discussion about the varying ethical standards of the players who will have similar capability, this surgical capacity to destroy with incredible precision, whereas we have widely varying levels of ethics and morality?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that animates George's book. He essentially ends the book with a call to action to say that those of us that are concerned about the ethics and morality of using robots and artificial intelligence in warfare need to get very good at using robots and artificial intelligence in warfare, because we have to be able to vote with our armies and our navies and our air forces, not just with good arguments. That said, I do think that what's be, what's going to become most important and the way that this technology interacts with the ethics of killing, I think the first and most important idea is we have we have a conception of the ethics of war based on the idea that war is a special moral case, right? That there are things that we can do in war, not all things, but there are things that we can do in war in virtue of the fact that we are at war. And most of the moral arguments around this, there are a lot of political arguments, there are a lot of arguments based in law, but for me, the moral arguments are primary. Most of the moral arguments around treating war as an exceptional space have to do with our capabilities inside that space, right? It was just simply speaking kind of unfair to expect soldiers to apply what you might call civil morality to the space of war. And I think these tools put real pressure on that idea, because as our collective capability increases in these capacities, the ability to discriminate, the ability to be much more wildly efficient with our fires, right? You think about the devastation and the waste of a place like the Somme, literally metric tons of ammunition hurled to no good purpose, operationally, strategically, to say nothing of morally, right? That level of waste is just not a feature of war in the age of agenic warfare. In fact, if you are doing it that way, not only are you being immoral, you're being plain stupid, right? And so it's this one fundamental idea that comes from the tradition of the just war and that comes into the 20th century, is that war is an exceptional moral space with its own set of rules. Very important rules. We fight about very important things, and the just war is something worth fighting for, but it's got its own set of rules. And what's been interesting to me is that starting in the War on Terror, a school coming out of Oxford, the folks that I studied with in Oxford, put pressure on this view of the just war philosophically. They just took it to task, and come to find out, it kind of crumbles in the face of real analytical philosophical analysis. It just doesn't make sense conceptually. But the reply to this school has always been, well, you guys just don't understand what war is like, and which was always interesting for me because I've been to war 3 times, and this school connected with me the way they talked about war and the way I made decisions and the way I watched the US Army make decisions really, really connected with me in a way that traditional just war theory never did, precisely because it accorded with my experience of combat. And I think as we move forward into the age of agentic warfare, we are going to see a what you might think of as a much smaller conception of ethics, right? So traditional just war theory is about states fighting states and the rules that I need to preserve that monopoly on violence, right? That's how we typically conceive of the state, as having the monopoly on legitimate violence. Well, I think as you democratize these agentic systems and you democratize the power to make war in this way, our unit of analysis needs to shrink really, really small. And I think, and I'll talk about this in the panel, I think the unit of analysis is the kill chain, right? It's something that works in terms of the moral theory of the case. I can put kill chains in defense of people, as opposed to talking about states and highways and those sorts of things. I can talk about how many people am I defending? What is the moral gain of that defense, and so forth. And so I've seen a real uh, alignment of the state of the operational art in terms of agentic warfare with the state of the art in just war theory in terms of this new school that came out of Oxford over the last 3 decades. It's weird to call it a new school, right? In the timelines of philosophical movements, right? We talk in terms of decades, and revisionist just war theory is definitely still the new school.
And so, as you're describing that model, it sounds like that kill chain approach can be used equivalently for strike operations. In this case, potentially kinetic strike based on the capabilities on the particular drone or robot. And it can be used to protect forces and facilities as well. So that it's really as much in terms of what force or precision you'll apply to the enemy, but also how you will counter theirs. Is that part of what you're conceptualizing with the approach that you just described?
Yeah, I do think it works really well. I don't know if you did this intentionally, but that seems clearly to be a reference to Fuller's strike move protect. I think what makes kill chains really interesting, and I'll be interested to talk to you when we sit down in DC. I I think the way George talks about, he calls these things drone arrays, right? So instead of drone swarms and all that kind of thing, he talks about an array, and it the drone array, because of the way you can put capabilities together and the way robotics and AI work in persistent ways, right? They don't have the attentional split focus that human cognition has. Um, that I think it puts pressure on the idea that Fuller's old axiom that a force in being is either striking, moving, or protecting. I'm not sure, but I think drone arrays can do all three at the same time, and that is, and it's hard to understate how dramatically that would change the operational art, to say nothing of the, increasing our capacity to do things like protect people and those sorts of things in the space of conflict. And so what's really interesting is that the way the means of warfare is changing, such another way to think when I talk about a smaller focus or a smaller conception, the means of warfare are changing in a way that I think means that it puts new ends in view, right? So where we had to work really hard in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century to put violent means to political ends, I think we can, with agentic warfare, target political ends in terms of the protection of human life, the protection of political autonomy, and the protection of the integrity of things like legitimate states. We can put those much more directly in view because there's not this sideways saunter through the other states military force, if that makes sense.
It does. And that was an intentionally leading question. Late in my career, as I was working at the operational level of war between some joint operations and then Army operations positions, what I found was we had increasing precision in our planning and execution for the kill chain, whichever framework you believed in, D3A, F3A, all the different models that are in place. We had increasing precision based on the lessons we had learned in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we were able to continue to apply those. And I think they are leading edge thinking with where we're going with agentic warfare. But what I discovered was, and this was quite illuminating for me, because there was a kinetic strike on a senior leader in Iraq that had a direct influence on where we were in Afghanistan at the time in terms of what a proportional response might have been. And our ability to protect ourselves was much more limited than I would have liked. And I was not explicitly aware of that until we started to reach this point. And the point of my comment here is that we don't have discrimination and precision in our protection to the extent we should, given the value of what we're seeking to protect and the associated, I'll call it economic or value of the potential means for mitigating strike as well. So where we have this highly precise kill chain, which I think will benefit greatly from what you described and what you and George and Todd are going to talk about, I'm not sure that we have the same philosophy, not your type of philosophy, but the same framework applied in terms of precision of protect. And by extension, I think if we had a core headquarters, a hypersonic battery, and a tank battalion arrayed in the same general strike area, and we had one Patriot unit to protect them, I don't know that our systems right now are discriminate in terms of which target you would protect with a Patriot and which you wouldn't. But that's something I think that we also have the opportunity to explore through this panel and through our future work as well.
Yeah, that's really well said. I think that's and there's just so much there to talk about. So the first is, I think you're spot on with the assessment of the technological state of play, right? One of the reasons we have this crisis of maneuver is that it's weird to talk about this, because we usually talk about in operational art, like you talk about the strength of the offense versus the strength of the defense, right? But it's weird because what's missing is something like counter UAS defense, right? But at the same time, really what that crisis of maneuver is it's an inability to protect yourself in any robust way, right? Whether you're a tank in Ukraine or core headquarters on the second island chain. Like it's just a really hard problem to solve, and the technology is not caught up there. But the deeper question I think that you're pointing at is just the way these tools, again, the change in means is going to put new ends in play in a way that I think is a really profound shift from our thinking, right? The idea that you can't defend everywhere, because if you defend everywhere, you defend nowhere. But man, it sure feels like I can defend a lot more places if I have the right technology in place. If our protect chains, might be a phrase we could coin here in this podcast, if our protect chains are as technologically robust and respectable as our kill chains. But of course, the point, I guess you might say, is that the point of these robotic AI kill chains is that they're eminently fungible. We just have to be smart enough to make sure that the thing that's in our kill chain can kill the incoming hypersonic as well as it can kill, it's just a question of selecting the right munition, or switching, having the AI switch the code on the warhead so that it's seeking, you know, incoming ballistic missiles as opposed to the tank over the ridgeline and those sorts of things. Like the fungibility of these systems just seems almost infinite.
And what I'm really excited about, Bob, is everything you just described in that last series of comments is going to be represented by panel members and technologies that are going to be in the room with us at the Red Thread House at AUSA. So thank you really for tying it up in terms of how we're going to look at really critical topics like protection, strike, AI and command and control, how we do command and control to enable logistics, which will be its own unique challenge, especially because of vulnerability to strike with the ubiquitous robotics and drones that we'll see in the future fight. So before I wrap things up, Bob, is there any closing comments you'd like to make as a teaser to what's ahead with this panel that you're
Yeah,
going
I think one, I would just love to echo what you just said. I think that this the Red Thread House at AUSA is precisely the kinds of things that we need in the defense industry space to really speed innovation. It's the kind of conversations and the kind of space and people together in the audience to actually walk out with a team that's going to go solve some really important problem. I know for me, the technical problem that has me most fascinated is how do we bridge the what I call or what people call, I'm not the only one that came up with this term, right? So it's a surface to task problem. So as these agents, both robotic and artificially intelligent agents, move deeper into our kill chains, they are going to run into a problem. It's really essentially a translation problem. The data that they use to understand their world is not going to be the same data that we use to understand our world. And it is going to be on the humans to understand how that data gets the data on things like our moral obligations, the legal framework that guides our operations, the tactical and, referring tactical operations and tactical choices to operational and strategic ends, right? At some point, our artificially intelligent agents are going to need to make choices like you just described. Do I protect the core headquarters, the Patriot battery itself, the tank battalion, or the town that all three of those things were deployed to protect in the first place, right? That runs on a set of data right now that machines just, it's not that they don't understand it, it's that they aren't even sensitive to it, right? Because we haven't done the work to program in those kinds of databases into the things that these agents use, right? And so their data surface is inadequate to the tasks that we're very quickly going to start to ask them to do. And that's the technical problem that I'm really interested to talk about. But as far as the Red Thread House itself, it's going to be a fantastic show. I'm pretty sure I'm going to find three or four people that want to talk to me about surface to task and those sorts of things, and hopefully, we'll walk out with a team of people dedicated to solving a really hard problem and moving us down the ultimate goal, which is wanting to be part of the conversation that resolves what ethics and morality in 21st century warfare looks like, not just playing second fiddle to our competitors on that score and many others.
Hey, Bob, thanks so much for that closing comment. And two things from my perspective before I wrap up. First, I'd like to do another podcast with you and explore both the technical and ethical or moral elements of both the kill chain and the term we coined today, the protect chain. Because I think there's a lot of parallels between those two models. And with my operational experience and your academic and operational experience, I think it'd be really worthwhile to explore that ahead of the Red Thread House at AUSA to have that backdrop to the discussion that you, George, and Todd are going to have under Joe's moderation. And if what we've talked about today on this podcast is interesting to you, we've just described one of the 6 panels that are going to take place during our one-day run of show on Tuesday, October 14th during AUSA. To learn more, 2 quick channels for you. Go to our website, www.theredthreadx.com, or look us up on LinkedIn. That's our primary marketing venue right now. And you can certainly direct message myself or Bob to get connected with what we're doing, what the panels will entail, and how you can secure an invite to join us, because we want to make sure we're challenging conventions, challenging thinking, but also proposing and resourcing solutions to go forward. Bob, thanks again for your time for us to discuss this, and I can't wait to hear this panel play out in person.
Thanks, Jay. I'm excited about the Red Thread House and looking forward to it immensely.